You ever wonder how people told time in the middle of the night thousands of years before anyone even dreamed of a light bulb? Well, we're going to dive into an incredibly clever piece of ancient tech that solved that exact problem.
Seriously, just try to picture it for a second. No phone screen to glance at, no watch on your wrist. How would you know if it's 2 a.m. or 4 a.m.? For the ancient Egyptians, this wasn't just some minor inconvenience. It was a critical, massive problem they absolutely had to solve. And that gets us right to the heart of the matter, the sunless time problem. You see, the Egyptians' main tool for telling time had one really big, really obvious weakness.
Sundials were fantastic, as long as the sun was shining. But what happens at night or on a super cloudy day? Yeah, they were completely useless. And for a society that needed to perform sacred rituals and track stars after dark, that just wasn't going to cut it. They needed a timekeeper that worked 24/7.
So, faced with this problem, what did they do? Well, they got creative. They turned to a completely different natural element and came up with a pretty ingenious liquid solution. They invented the water clock. It was later known by its Greek name, the clepsydra, which literally means water thief. How cool is that name? A water thief? It literally steals water drop by drop to tell you the time.
Okay, so the basic idea was just brilliant in its simplicity. You fill a stone pot with water, you let that water drip out of a tiny little hole at the bottom, and as the water level drops, boom, it passes these markings on the inside that show the hours ticking by. It's just this incredibly elegant concept, right? Turning a simple drip into a reliable clock. You gotta understand, this was a huge leap in thinking. They went from just watching something happen in the sky, like the sun moving, to creating their own miniature, man-made process to track time. They were, in a very real way, bottling time itself.
But here's the catch. While the idea sounds simple, making one of these things actually work accurately? Whoa, that was a whole other story. This was some seriously sophisticated engineering for the time, and the challenges they ran into were pretty immense.
Think about the problems they had to solve. First, you need a perfectly steady, predictable drip. Easier said than done. Then you have to deal with the water pressure changing as the pot empties out. They actually shaped the vessels with sloped sides just to counteract that. So clever. But their biggest headache was calibrating it for a time system that is totally alien to us.
And this is where things get absolutely wild. See, we live in a world of equal hours. An hour is 60 minutes, period. Winter, summer, it doesn't matter. But the Egyptians? Nope. They used unequal hours. They took all the daylight and divided it into 12 parts, and then they took all the darkness and divided that into 12 parts. So what does that mean? It means a daylight hour in the long summer was way longer than a daylight hour in the middle of winter. And their water clocks had to be built to account for this. The math is just mind-boggling.
So why? Why go through all of this trouble? Well, because this wasn't some fun little gadget. It was absolutely essential to the way their entire society functioned. Think about the priests in the temples. They had these super complex ceremonies that had to happen at very specific times, whether it was day or night. For them, the water clock wasn't just helpful, it was a tool for keeping the entire cosmos in balance. It really all boiled down to this one big idea: sacred order. Keeping time wasn't just about scheduling things. To the Egyptians, a reliable clock was a religious instrument. It was their way of plugging into the structured, divine rhythm of the universe.
And of course, for the astronomers, the clepsydra was a total game-changer. Finally, they could break down the long nights into measurable chunks. This let them track the movements of the stars with way more accuracy, which was a huge deal for their calendar, their religion, pretty much everything.
But the story of this invention doesn't just end in Egypt. No way. This idea of liquid time flowed right on through history. So, it all starts around 1500 BCE in Egypt. From there, the technology spreads across the ancient world to Greece and Rome. But here's the really amazing part. The core principle, using a predictable physical process to measure time, that's the direct ancestor of the gears and mechanical clocks, and even the quartz vibrations in your watch today.
When you get right down to it, the clepsydra was so much more than a bucket with a hole in it. It was a complete shift in how people thought, one of humanity's first real successes at capturing the invisible flow of time and making it something we could actually see and measure.
So that kind of leaves us with a final thought, right? The Egyptians took on this fundamental problem, telling time in the dark, by harnessing a simple, natural process. It makes you wonder, what simple problem are we facing today that's just waiting for its own ingenious solution?